And is that started? Okay, great. So for those who may not still be familiar, I just wanted to go over some Zoom tips. First, there is the chat feature. There will be BPDA staff attending to the chat throughout the evening if you choose to ask questions there. During a Q&A session, which we will hold at the end of the meeting, you may use the raise hand function on the bottom of your screen. That will put you in a line of participants I will call on in order. And during that time, you'll be able to unmute and we can all hear you. And we ask that you just keep muted out of respect for those who are speaking. And I would like to just go over a bit of a code of conduct and some Zoom etiquette to make sure that this is a pleasant experience for everybody who's involved. So we want to encourage people to use their camera if they would like to speak. It's not a requirement, just a way for us to connect with everybody. We will limit, seeing that this is a large meeting, we will limit everyone to speak to 2 minutes in the interest of fairness. We will enforce this, and although staff will give about a 30-second response. Again, if you don't feel like you've been heard, please feel free to email me. My contact information will be given by the end of this. We also ask that there may be differences of opinions here tonight, which is absolutely fine and encouraged. We just ask that everyone be respectful and that they be aimed at the topics at hand and not the people who are providing them. If the event of unacceptable behavior happens, well, first, that unacceptable behavior includes threatening to take unwarranted legal action, bullying, harassment, or any sort of mocking, threats or derogatory speech, grandstanding, exceeding the time limits I just spoke on, or any other violations. Again, we just want to make sure things are pleasant. Those who do violate that will be given a verbal or written warning, depending on in-person or the speaking option or chat. They may be muted or removed, depending on the circumstance. So please let's not resort to any of this and make it an educational and enjoyable experience. So the goals for this discussion are to update the Charlestown community about the results of the engineering report that was conducted by FOAF Engineering. And then we are opening that conversation up if you do have any questions, but also really inviting some ideas about what we would like the future of future uses to be included. So the agenda for this evening, I'm going to go over the project location and some planning insights for those who may be unfamiliar. My colleague Gigi will be detailing the RFP that was put out that both was awarded for the engineering study. Then there will be the engineering study presentation, followed by that open conversation from the community and some next steps about what you can expect from us moving forward. So project location and overview. So to orient us, Pier 5 is located within the Charlestown Navy Yard, as you can see from this indication. Originally a Navy pier, it was built in wood in 1912 and reconstructed in concrete in 1943. There has been a history of disposition at the site that we want to make mention of. In 2007, there was a development proposed that would bring 89 units with a cafe and experiential space within what was called an interactive maritime park. In September 2020, the BPDA released another disposition RFP to redevelop the property to allow open space, residential, and/or hotel use. The BPDA decided to retract all these proposals based on community feedback. But moving forward and looking ahead, there are several plans and other jurisdictions that govern this area that will be incorporated in any path forward. First of which is the zoning district. The Pier 5 is located within the Article 42F Charlestown waterfront. Seeing as it is a waterfront use, it is also under the jurisdiction of Chapter 91. As we will hear about in the scope of this study, those are all water dependent uses that have been explored, such as marinas, recreational uses, boating facilities, and so therefore are compliant with Chapter 91. Other plans, such as the Charlestown Navy Yard Master Plan in 1978, the Municipal Harbor Plan in 1999, amended in 2008, all have contemplated the adaptive reuse and development of the site, throughout its history. Furthermore, the 2007 Waterfront Activation Plan really encouraged the ideas of civic and cultural spaces and public facilities for public use, as well as the potential outdoor exhibit and interpretive area along the Harbor Walk. More recent planning efforts have also imagined new open spaces and ways to, again, better connect the public not only to the waterfront, but provide a diversity of experiences. And importantly, also considered the flood mitigation that would need to be required in any potential uses. Plan Charlestown certainly focused on this with reference to the plans I just mentioned, with particular attention towards connectivity, adaptive reuse, preservation, waterfront activation, improved signage, and economic development. And even more recently, the Coastal Resilience Solutions for East Boston and Charlestown Phase 2 focused on the need for a raised harbor walk in the Navy Yard specifically. So moving forward with that in mind, that resiliency piece, we want to make sure that any future for Pier 5 considers rising sea levels and the flood vulnerability that can impact this future. So the City of Boston and the BPDA have studied the future of flooding by using the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model, which has informed that there has the potential to be 9 inches of sea level rise in the 2030s and up to potentially 40 inches of sea level rise by the 2070s. So again, just really understanding that in the next year, in 2024, there will be a vulnerability assessment of this area, and any future plans for this site must be considerate of that reality. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Gigi, who will go over the details of the RFP for the engineering site.
Hello and good evening, everybody. My name is Gigi Mandan, and I'm a senior project manager within the capital construction department in the BPDA. We have published an RFP for this property in November 2021. Just to remind everybody, RFP stands for Request for Proposals. We published a request for proposals from engineering companies to complete a study, and that will subsequent into a design process per the RFP that was published in November. We held virtual and in-person meetings in December 2022, and then published a few addendums in January 2023, and we received 3 proposals from engineering companies Desimone, Foth, and GEI. Next slide, Natalie. The scope of the RFP included 3 phases. We are currently in phase 1, and phase 1 included study and assessment of the pier structural condition, and this assessment was based on the guidebook Waterfront Facilities Inspection and Assessment Manual, published by American Society of Civil Engineers, and is the manual that all engineering companies in coastal structural work refer to all around the country. And after that, to provide, based on the condition, to provide design concepts and cost estimates for 3 programs. The programs were Program A for improving existing pier to accommodate pedestrian loads, meaning the chain link fence would be removed and people could go on it safely. Currently, it's not safe for even pedestrian load. Program B, to improve existing pier to accommodate improvement as a public park or a sailing center, which means repairs would be made to accommodate, repairs would be designed and permitted to accommodate that kind of load as a public park and sailing center. And Program C, for demolition of existing pier to create open water sheet, and that's Program C. we are still in phase 1. Phase 2 and phase 3 would be designed. It's kind of up and down there. Phase 2 is actually providing design development, and phase 3 is the construction phase. And we are still in phase 1. And this, what we're doing here right now, is part of phase 1, meaning we're not done yet. Next slide, Natalie. And after we received the 3 responses from DeSimone, FOTH, and GAI, we did an evaluation. All the responses submitted to us was reviewed for the same criteria, and those were qualified staff, relevant experience, demonstrated capacity, qualified subconsultants, and understanding the scope of this RFP. In addition to the reviewing the responses, the selection committee interviewed each company. We interviewed DeSimone, FOTH, and GEI. And after reviewing the documents and the interviews, the selection committee selected FOTH as most advantageous with their extensive similar work that they did in the area and other parts of the country. And the board approved the contract to award the contract to FOTH for under this RFP in March 2023. Now,
Thank you, Gigi. So with that, I will now pass it off to FOTH in order to present the engineering report itself.
Thank you, Natalie. My name is Paul Marsala. I'm with FOTH Engineering. I'm joined today by Scott Skunchik. He's the senior market leader in our Ports and Harbors division, and Fiona Vardy. She's a senior permitting specialist with our company. So you can go ahead to the slide. So I was part of the inspection team that went up to Pier 5 and conducted the inspections. I worked with our structural specialists to produce the overview, the report, and we came up with this presentation to present our findings here at this public meeting. As part of the presentation, I'm going to give an overview of the pier itself. Then I'd like to get into the inspection methods that we used, some observations and measurements that came out of the inspection. Those observations and measurements were used to assign damage ratings to each element of the structure. I'll go over that. Those damage ratings led us to a final condition assessment and a recommendation for the structure itself. And then I'll get into some repair options and cost estimates that we developed. Next slide. So for an overview of the pier, here's a record drawing of the pier from back in 1943 when it was built. It's 665 feet long by 125 feet wide. Consists of approximately 1,650 spliced steel H-piles encased in reinforced concrete. It sits in approximately 27 feet of water at low tide. It's mean low water. Next slide. So a little bit on H-piles, just so everybody that's in the meeting, if you don't have any background. So the picture off to the right shows a typical section taken of one of these H-piles that are encased in concrete. So an H-pile is a H-shaped steel member. Pier 5 piles, we assume to be H14 by 102 based on record research. Those are approximately 14-inch H's made of just under 3/4 inch steel. These piles were originally encased in rebar reinforced concrete. Most of the concrete currently has deteriorated, which is exposing most of the H-piles and the reinforcing rebar. Something to note is falling rebar and concrete underneath the pier, and the tight spacing of the pilings limited the safe access for the inspection to just the outer piles of the structure. The last thing to note on these H-piles in particular is that they aren't one continuous pile that go from the deck all the way down below the mud line. They are actually spliced pieces of H-pile, which was typical during that time during World War II when it was constructed due to lack of materials. All right, next slide. So for inspection methods, we take guidance from the ASCE manual, reporting and engineering practice. We conducted a level 1 visual inspection on 13% of the elements of the structure, which is all of the accessible piles on the outer layer, and as well as the pile caps. We use ultrasonic thickness measurements on all the accessible piles. That was about 10% of the total structure, which is 2% of the guidance for this type of measurement. The UT measurements are a non-bias and quantitative method that we use for H-pile damage ratings, meaning that it's an actual instrument. It's not relying on opinion or just an observation. This was a conservative method as far as assigning how severely damaged the structure is, as most of the damage could be seen below the water line, and the instrument can't be used below the water line. So this measurement was taken not quite at the most severely damaged parts of the structure, but is still nonetheless a measurement and a good data point. And I'll get a little bit into the UT measurement method later on. Next slide, please. So for pile cap damage ratings, so the pile caps are an element that transfers the load of the deck to the piles themselves. And a damage rating is a description of the condition of the elements within a structure. Pile caps being one element, the pile itself being another element. As I mentioned, we use standard criteria from the ASTM manual. Possible ratings range from no defects to severe based on that guidance. Exposed reinforcement was the primary factor at Pier 5 that put most of the pile caps into the major damage rating category. Very few pile caps did not have exposed reinforcement. Some of the more severe pile caps showed a loss of cross-sectional area exceeding 30% and structural cracks greater than 1/4 inch. Those are the leading factors in downgrading them further to a severe rating. And the next slide will show you some examples. So here are some examples of the different ratings that were assigned from out in the field. To the left, we have an example of a minor damage pile cap. You see there's some small cracks is the main contributing observation putting it into this category. This represented about 8% of pile caps. The center photograph here, which was most of the condition of the pier. This is the major damage rating category. Exposed reinforcement is what puts it into this category based on the guidance. And this made up 74% of the caps that were observed. And then off to the right, we have the severe damage. Like I mentioned, what puts it into this category based on the guidance is greater than 30% section loss, as well as 1/4 inch or greater cracks. This was about 18% of caps. Next slide. So a little bit about UT measurements. It's important to note that if the concrete encasement around these piles were considered part of the pile structure to be rated, everything would be severe damage. And that's because, like with the pile caps, there is exposed reinforcing steel, which automatically puts it into that category. But since it's hard to say at the time it was constructed, if that had a significant impact on the structural integrity of the structure, or if it was just to protect the structural member, which is the steel. We ignored the concrete aspect, and we just went with our H-pile steel measurements to assign the damage ratings here. So for starters, we assume the HP 14102 thicknesses. So like I mentioned, that's just under 3/4 of an inch, 0.705 inches thick. You were clean the surface, you measure the current thickness, calculate the percent loss for each pile, and then an objective damage rating based on percent loss is assigned to each pile. And what you're looking at there is just a diagram of an H pile with measurements, 14 inches in one direction, 14.8 in another, with your thickness. And for terminology, you see we're pointing to the web and the flanges of the pile itself. Next slide, please. So just like with the pile caps, I'd like to show you guys some examples of damage ratings of the piles themselves. Again, this is just based on percent loss of steel from that assumed starting steel thickness at the time of construction. And these brackets are guidance from a standard. So on the left, we have a minor damage pile example. So the minor damage contains piles that have 0 to 15% steel loss. This was representative of 30% of the piles. In the center, we have a major damage pile. So this was this bracket contains 30 to 50% steel loss. You can see the what we call a knifing edge of the steel there, where it comes to a point. You don't actually take the measurement at that thinnest edge. You take it further away per the standard, which was conducted. But you can see the steel loss there, and that was 20% of the piles. And then all the way up to the severe damage off to the right. Anywhere greater than 50% steel loss, the piles fall into this category. This was 36% of the piles that were observed. Next. And you can click again. This is, hopefully it'll work. Yeah, there we go. So this is part of the cleaning process, getting all the incompetent steel out of the way before you can take a measurement on the competent steel. And then that would have been followed up by some scraping, wire brush cleaning, wiping down, and then the instrument to take the UT measurement. Next slide. So I want to talk briefly about the splice plate that I had mentioned early on. So as I mentioned, these piles are not one continuous pile from the deck all the way down to the bottom elevation of the pile. Just lengths of steel for that length were not readily available during the time of construction due to the war. So it was common to splice piles together with welding and a splice plate. A dive inspection that was not conducted by FOAT, this was a previous dive inspection, showed complete loss of this weld material. So we didn't use this information in the total assessment of the structure, but it is important to note that should one of the alternatives eventually be chosen that includes repair of the structure, dive inspection would need to be done on each pile selected for repair, and this would need to be considered. Next slide. So the final condition assessment rating. So again, we took these definitions from the standard. They're based on quantitative measurements of the H piles, as well as the observations from the pile caps. And this puts the Pier 5 in serious condition. And we recommend Pier continues to be closed for public access. I've showed in this slide, folks can review it. I won't read through all of it, some of the different categories. And then we've landed on serious condition. And this is advanced deterioration, overstressing, or breakage may have significantly affected the load bearing capacity of primary structural components. Load failures are possible and loading restriction may be necessary. Repairs may be carried out on a high priority basis with urgency. Next slide. So now we'll get into the program alternatives that were touched on and the structural, what we're calling structural action options to be used for cost estimating purposes based on those programs. So the first program A, safe public access. Program B, public park, open space with a sailing center. Program C, demolition and complete removal of the pier to create an open water sheet for future development. For estimating purposes, we've kind of subcategorized these a little bit into some structural options that we considered. So the first structural option would be a full repair of the entire Pier 5 footprint. Next, we have a partial demolition and an L-shaped repair. We have a full demolition and an L-shaped new construction, or a full demolition and water sheet use. Next slide, please. So for the full structural repair option, the assumption for the estimate was bringing the pier to pedestrian loading. This did not include any park or structures. This would be the full repair of the entire Pier 5 footprint. And there are sort of three options here. There's the non-traditional or quake wrap fiberglass jackets, 8 $18.5 million. Something to note here, there's a lack of local use with this method, and experienced marine contractors willing to do it. The service life history is unavailable in our region for this option. There are a traditional jacket repair, 32.9 million, or a non-traditional carbo shield repair. This was used at Pier 4 at $29.8 million. Next slide, please. So the next thing we considered was an L-shaped pier. Again, for this, we only considered pedestrian loading. This would be, so for full demolition with an L-shaped reconstruction, our estimate has 10.8 million. For a partial demolition with an L-shaped non-traditional repair, 15.9 million. And a partial demolition with L-shaped carbo shield repair, 14.6 million. And we've also included a sketch plan of what that L-shaped pier could look like. This would be the full length of the pier and then the full width, but only in an L shape. And what we have off down to the right, you folks can see, is an example of an L-shaped pier. This one is actually half the size in both directions, but this is in Oak Bluffs, Martha's Vineyard, just to have a general feel for what an L-shaped pier may look like. Again, this is half the size in both directions, but something to look at visually. Next slide. So the next option we looked at was full demolition with a floating marina. So the assumptions we took for this would be a 550-foot long main float sections running down the center. And we assumed 20 finger floats, 10 on each side. And we estimated this to cost $11.2 million. You see there an example of what that would look like. For all of these options, that would, if demolition was part of it, it includes the demolition in those estimates. Next slide, please. So this is just a summary of those cost estimates for the different repair options and the sub options within those repairs, so that when folks are reviewing these slides, if they're provided, you have it all in one place. And I believe that was all I had. Click on, I think that was my last slide. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. So within this next session, we want to really start a community conversation. But we also can understand that we just presented a lot of information. So to briefly recap, when it comes to waterfront planning, we know that the ground floor of this must be dedicated public use as per Chapter 91. And since a lot of the uses that we contemplated today were water dependent, the public marinas, the boat parks, things of that nature, it would be compliant with most and not enforce other regulations that are required within Chapter 91. And additionally, from what we learned with the East Boston and Charlestown Phase 2 for the coastal resilience, that any sort of development or potential infrastructural improvements have to be compliant with flood resiliency. And then Paul, in his great presentation, I just wanted to go over that Pier 5 is in a, quote, serious condition, serious being a technical term that I'll describe to have meant advanced deterioration. Design concepts and cost estimates that were provided for 3 programs. And as a recap, those programs were Program A, improves existing pier for pedestrians. So there is ability to, as Gigi mentioned,
Do we have the larger Twix, like the 4-packs of Twix?
Remove the fence and handle a pedestrian load. Program B, something a little bit more, the existence of a potential public park and the infrastructure that might require, and sailing center. And then Program C, the demolition of existing pier for a water sheet that could potentially invite a new use. There are average costs for each of these proposals that were provided by the contract. Again, the full pier repair would cost, depending on the methods that Paul laid out, between 18.5 to $32.9 million. The L-shaped pier would result, again, depending on the method, between 10.8 to $15.9 million. And then the floating marine option would be about $11 million. So with that being said, we welcome questions, of course, if it clarifying for Paul and his team to answer. But also we want to make sure that we're beginning the conversation about what you would like to see here. So what are climate resiliency measures that we may not be missing that you would like us to be aware of? What are uses you would like to see, or any programs of particular importance to you and the Charlestown community? And if there's anything else we can consider. So Dan Everprompt raised his hand first. So Dan, would you like to start us off with questions?
Yeah, I am concerned with the L-shaped option. That seems awful weak from a use perspective. I would prefer seeing something more like a endpoint that's larger if you're going to go that route. In Europe, I vaguely remember seeing a setup that was a double pier with a span type architecture that ran across to open it all up. But I don't remember enough of it. It was so long ago. I believe it was in Liverpool, in England, Great Britain. So I think there might be some other options of architecturally doing it than what's being provided so far. I really wish we had more open park space in the Navy Yard space, considering the amount of growth that we're now expected to perceive, that we're being expected to have, from 21 to be 42 plus thousand people, thousand people. It is a heavy load without enough open space, especially in the more developed spaces like the Navy Yard and the core community, which were starved already. So we really need to do something there.
Thanks, Dan. I think it's a great feedback and one worth commenting on as we look for the future forward. Stephen O'Brien. You're still muted.
Yeah. Okay.
You're good.
Simple question. What on the L-shaped pier, what's kind of the length and the width of that? And especially on the narrow end, what's, looking at the picture, it doesn't look like there's a lot there.
Paul, can you answer that?
No, if you go back a few slides, I think he showed.
Okay,
maybe.
let me go back then.
Yeah.
Here. So yeah, we can oh,
sorry about that. Yeah,
Paul.
I don't use Zoom much. I was trying to figure out how to get myself back.
Like
Yeah, so it would be the full length and the current width of the pier. I'd have to go back to my measurements here.
and
One
Stephen,
moment.
We'll be posting all of this too, but we could also follow up with specifics.
So that was 665 feet long, and then the bottom of the L would come across the full width, which is 125 feet. And I believe we used for the cost estimating a 15-foot wide. I want to say 15-foot wide shape.
Great, thanks, Paul.
Yep.
Then I'll move on to Lois.
Hi. Couple of questions. One of them is, why did you do another study when there already was a study done a number of years ago, which already declared that 2/3 of the pier was inadequate and was falling into the water, and the BPTA said we're going to tear down that part of it, so I want to take the rest of it with us. The other part of it is, who do you see paying for this? Was the BPA going to develop it, or are you going to have to try to find somebody, if it was a park, somebody else to come up with the funding?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Lois. Those are great questions. So on the first perspective, so this engineering assessment is building off of the past assessments that were done previously. So those did incorporate a lot of review of the pier. This was actually, and I can let Paul speak to exactly the scope and the amount of piers that were assessed, but this was a even more expansive review of the pier and an ability for us to weigh different options, whether it was demolition, a reconstruction of some sort of portion of the pier, or a full rebuild. And so that was additional information that we needed as part of this. But as Gigi had mentioned in the original scope, this is not only focused on just this initial assessment, but after a determination is made as to the appropriate path forward and which option be chosen, we'll be working with FOTH in addition to a contractor in the future is to really enact the vision of what the pier should be. So they're brought on to help us with that. And again, we are very much only in phase one and want to have these conversations and open dialogues to inform the future of the pier before we make that determination and move forward. And to that point about cost, so, previously the BPDA had committed to the funding of the demolition of the site, and we want to make sure that we are, putting our best foot forward and moving forward with what the appropriate use is. And so the BPDA will contribute to a future solution. But again, we want to have these conversations, engage, look towards the visioning of this site and what that potential use is in the future to figure out what that exact contribution should be from the agency.
So the BPDA is committing to spend some money to repair at least, but not necessarily build, or yes, build something.
So we, not specifically, so we do not have a prescribed option. We do not know which option we're moving forward with. So depending on, and Natalie will speak to this, we intend to have a future RFP released for the future use of the site and the ability to convert this into the vision that is community informed. That will inform the BPDA's contribution here.
I'd vote for a park.
Love that. That's the kind of feedback we're hoping to hear as well. So, obviously, if there's any questions around what was presented here tonight, but we really want to advance this dialogue and start talking about what the future of this is, because we know it's been a long time coming and we really want to see this accessible. So again, that is part of the dialogue in addition to just reviewing the study with everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lois and Rebecca. Jane?
Yes, thank you for this information. It's very helpful. As I think about it and I look at the area, you have two piers already on each side that people can walk and enjoy. So a little bit, I wonder what the heck the L shape will be for. Is it going to be a pickup spot for a taxi, water taxi? Is it going to move the ferry? I don't know. It seems kind of limited and really adding much more than the other piers have. And then if you put in all that marina in front, would that go to the sailing center? And how would something like that be really a resource for the whole community versus just adding to the sailing center? I personally also think a park would be the most community oriented, but certainly the most expensive. And sometimes, and maybe you're not allowed to do this, it makes me wonder if it's better just to get rid of the whole thing and leave open water.
Thank you, Jane. I think you touched upon a lot of thoughts that we're considering, which is why we offered there to be 3 different programs for the scope, because we're just trying to learn from an engineering perspective about all 3 options and their cost estimates, but also from community feedback. So definitely appreciated. Jules?
Building on what Jane said, I think from an environmental and economic standpoint, a floating structure makes the most sense per the estimates you just gave us. And I'd be very interested in having the sailing center expand and have public access to whatever is floating. I think it's a different type of use of the water when you can go on a floating structure and get down close to the water. We can't do that on the other piers. And if the sailing center could have expanded facilities, it's an enormous resource to Boston, not just Charlestown, but Charlestown benefits enormously from the sailing center. So this a combination of a floating structure, I'm sure they need more than just docks or boats, and they need programming space. I'd be open to that as well. I just would emphasize that the public should be able to access the space in addition to the sailing center, just as it is on Pier 4. We can access the space, no problem. And I would like to see that in a floating structure.
Thank you. And under Chapter 91, that is a requirement that there is a public accessibility component to it. So regardless of the option, either the options you put. Oh, Gigi, please.
But the one little tweak to that, as much as I really love the Charlestown Marina, we can't walk down on those piers, and I understand why. They're private boats, they're expensive investments. There's a difference when you can walk down on the piers, but you can on the floating piers than when you can't.
Yeah, definitely understood. Thank you.
I was just gonna say, someone in the chat manually raised their hand because they couldn't find it. Kathleen Kolar, if
Oh, thank you.
If she wants to talk right now.
I think that's fair. Kathleen, would you like to speak? And then I'll go to Robin.
Is she on mute?
Yeah, Kathleen, the mute button should be under the reactions tab too, or on the top right.
Just want to give her a minute. Norris, I see you too, so I'll put you third in line. Thanks. All right, well, maybe if someone on staff.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Please continue.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You just went back on. Oh, there you are.
You muted, unmute. You had it there for a second.
I think she's having difficulty, so she's
Yeah.
gonna pass. Kathleen, feel free to type your question, or if you have ability later on, we can call back on you.
That sounds great. Robin?
Hi, I think of a three-prong approach to the use of the pier, not taking it away. It's a beautiful asset to the harbor. We're at the north of the harbor, and I think what we've called it is the jewel of the harbor, and like to preserve that. So an open water sheet is not something that I envision, but I do see sort of three elements: some that's environmental, that's coastal resilience, something that's something that is educational, continuing the work of courageous sailing, maybe bringing in other educational components, partnering with other organizations, and then something that is experiential. And that is, something that's available for the entire community to draw different groups of people to the waterfront. And that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Robin. So I'm going to go Chris next, and then Norris, he raised his hand the real way, and then we'll move on to Dan. So Chris, please. Hi, you're muted, Chris. Just got to hit that little,
yeah,
perfect.
So yeah, interesting discussion, and obviously very expensive to do anything. One thing that is what the actual cost for the demolition part is, because it's always been bundled with the various solutions. But just to offer some further comments, that the steel itself doesn't have a lot of creosote in it, and there's a lot of very rich marine life that's actually underneath the pier, so that when one thinks about the potential uses and the ecological impact, there's a whole component of what a future use would be that would be focused towards the educational, as well as the natural resource, et cetera, as well as the protection of the shore, that might involve essentially opening it up as in different ways, but to include a reef quality to it. There's a large squid population actually that lives under there that's being fished out regularly by fisher folks, and so we have a potential to adversely impact the quality of the water in our inner harbor, or to actually do something very creative with it. And I think a lot of the ideas where one opens the space, one perhaps even uses floating walkways as opposed to structural rebuild and takes advantage of that water space, including some shallower sections that enhances marine life and educational features tied to that, could be a solution that wouldn't be prohibitively expensive and would also preserve the view corridor from the rest of the harbor walk. We don't want to be trying to block off the vision as you walk around that edge of it. It's right at the head of the whole marina, and it's really the key to why everyone loves the Navy Yard so much is the views that one gets in walking that arc. So anyway, those are just some thoughts.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm going to go to Norris now.
Sorry, just very quickly, I know Chris asked the question and I want to make sure we get to it because it was always also asked in the chat a few times. Paul, could you just speak? I know we had you had looked into this, the cost of demolitions without the improvements and the other components that were contemplated. Is that something you could speak to?
Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I saw a few of those in the chat, so I did bring that up. I was ready for it. So throughout the cost, so these are just estimates, but we do contact contractors in the area that have experience with demolition, as well as I know some of the comments were impacts to environment. So the costs that we have roughly for the demolition portion would be 7.4 million. And that's inclusive of the methods that have recently been prescribed by the regulatory agencies from the environmental standpoint, which include, not just allowing the demolished debris to fall into the water, but to actually hook up to individual pieces, saw cut the concrete, and actually fly them onto land individually. So so that cost does address the most recent guidance and requirements by regulatory agencies from an environmental standpoint.
Thank you, Paul and Rebecca. So Norris?
I think part of my question has been answered, which is what is the cost of just pure demolition? That seems to be 9 million roughly, which means the marina component is somewhere around 2 or 3 million, I think, if I got that straight. My question then is that marina, which looks rather like the marinas on both sides, owned by the city, or is it provided by a new, yet to be determined RFP and operated by a private developer?
We will, following this Q&A portion, be going over the future disposition. So we are going to be RFPing it for private or soliciting proponents and what their applications may be, and negotiating likely a ground lease in the long term.
Thank you.
Yep. Dan?
Yes. This may have been answered earlier in the meeting. I had a little trouble getting on initially. I'm more interested in understanding what can't be built there, right? Just the concern about it being potentially put out for RFP for private development. Is there a limit on what can be built there as far as height restrictions or anything of that nature? Is my first question. And then my comment as far as use is concerned is, I think a park is what makes the most sense. You look at what's been done over in East Boston and what's being done over in East Boston. It was transformational for those neighborhoods. I think it's a great use of the waterfront where the public can access it in a way that's not available now here, just based on the Harbor Walk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We'll definitely note your comment about park. For your first question about building heights, Chapter 91 dictates that it can be no higher than 55 feet. However, kind of the next phases, and I'll get into this a little bit in the disposition slides, but we will be really using this community conversation to build out what we call development guidelines for the RFP. So when we do solicit proposals of what should go here, a lot of the conversations we're having now and will in the future too, will shape what we will be expecting out of those proposals. So there will be some control, certainly from both the BPDA and the community input. But thank you. Robert? Robert Mark, oh, you're muted. I think I can see you talking though. Robert, we can't hear you. Oh.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
We can. Yep.
You've estimated that sea levels will rise 9 inches by the 30s and 40 inches by the 70s. I'm wondering how a stationary pier, as opposed to a floating structure, will accommodate sea level rise. And the second question I had has just been answered. I was wondering, is it fair to assume that a public-private partnership would be the future of the pier if in fact we keep it and restore it?
Last question first. Did you think it is fair to assume that a public-private partnership will be happening in order to make sure that we have a viable product that's something we can do sooner than later? And then for your first question, can you repeat? Sorry.
Well, I'm just wondering how a stationary pier
Oh, yes.
will accommodate sea level rise that we're anticipating in the 30s, maybe even sooner. And then certainly 40 inches by the 70s seems to me to be create some serious issues for the pier versus a floating structure, which you've also shown.
I think it's a fair comment, and one I think we will be working with our coastal resiliency team to determine. But as a result of that study, we have determined that there's certain heights that we want to make sure that are being built to in the pier if there is a more permanent structure, in order to be aware of the 2030s and 2070s prediction. So there will be a heightened component to that in relation to that reality. But certainly I think the reason why a floating one was considered, your point is valid and definitely not off the table and worth discussing too. So thank you, Robert. Tim?
Hi, thanks, Natalie. I just wanted to make a comment. Obviously, a lot to consider here, a lot to weigh. But as part of Plan Charlestown, there was commitment made by the BPDA and the city to do everything possible to maintain the ratio of open space to residents. And as our population is expected to increase, as others have mentioned, that could be somewhere in the neighborhood of 30, 40, maybe even 50 net new acres of protected open space, which is going to be a very tall order to accomplish without looking at creative solutions like this one that presents itself to secure open space. So I just think in the calculus of what to do, we should be taking that into consideration. The city should be taking that in consideration to help meet that prior commitment at a minimum to secure for the public realm protected open space, if at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Definitely noted. Paul?
Yeah, thanks very much. Good presentation. I was reflecting on a number of us who were involved in Pier 5 earlier when those proposals had come out. And some people went to the mayor's office, and I can't remember who they were. I think Bob Markle might have been one of them, just to kind of get the temperature of what they would allow or not allow, or not allow, but what they'd like to see, what they wouldn't like to see. And one of the things, there was a lot covered in that, but one of the things that stuck out in my mind there was that the mayor's office is not inclined to go with something that looks like it's not benefiting the larger number of people in the city who don't have access normally to these kinds of things. And that, if we're doing an RFP, it seems like we should have whatever, criteria is coming from there factored into what we're doing. And I always felt like we had a solution here in the making, in the sense that the Courageous group on Pier 4 has always talked about how they could handle twice as many kids if they had a bigger place to, service them from. And so I'm putting that out there not because I have any, stake in this one way or the other, but I would hate to see us. I mean, in the absence of any constraints, of course, everybody's coming out here and saying what they want, but it's really not fair in a way to lead the group to think that we can have anything we want, because we can't. And there's the financial aspect of it. I'm not even going there, but I'm just thinking if part of what we need to consider in order to have the city behind us and doing whatever we're doing here is how we service, let's just say, underprivileged children or some, other segment of the population, then let's just put it out there, if not, fine. But I'm sure if we just ask for a public park and that's all we want out there, if the same people in the city that were around when we were going through this before are there, that it's going to get, voted down or, not be successful. So I just hate to see us waste time going down a path that's not in the end going to be fruitful.
Thank you, Paul. No, I think it's a valid point, and I just want to restate that this is definitely a beginning conversation, and not to be redundant or to waste time, but knowing that when we draft this RFP, it will go through city review as far as what those preferences are. In addition to community review, we'll be making sure that that the development concepts are also being shown to you all again, and we'll be able to talk that through too. So hopefully both parts can be accomplished. Pamela?
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Hi. My vote for this piece of property is to have a park. I don't want to see, as someone mentioned earlier, we have beautiful piers, but if you don't own a boat and you don't have a key to get down to these piers, you don't go out on them. So I don't want to see more boats unless somehow they're open to the public, which they won't be because boats are too expensive to leave open to the public. And I don't want to see that. But what if we had, floating or not floating, a park, but within that park there were, someone was just mentioning all the sea life that's underneath there and all the sea life that, that's under Pier 5 in general. Why not do something interesting with that? It will attract kids and people from all over the city and elsewhere. Like, what about maybe a section where there's some kind of glass where you can see through down to the ocean? Or maybe there are some areas where people can rent space to have like pop-up science fairs or pop-up something to do with science. And we've got, the resource of the group already in the Navy Yard, I forget what it's called now, whatever it is, that teaches science to kids, getting them involved in something over in Pier 5. But at any rate, I don't want to see a building going up there. I'd rather not see another private marina. And I think a park would be great and could be a very creative area as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll note that for sure. Rosemary?
Thank you. I was looking at something else. I had a couple of more specific questions. When we were talking about the cost of demolition, does that include the cost of any environmental remediation that will have, and if I missed it, I apologize, any environmental remediation that's going to have to occur under Pier 5 because of the hazardous chemicals that are under the muck surface? And it was an active Navy Yard until 1975. And so we know that there's arsenic, cadmium, probably PCBs, and God only knows what else that's under there. So that was that was my question is that part of the demo estimate? And if it isn't, is there an environmental impact study that's going to be done? And how is that going to be costed out? Because I think that muck's going to be stirred up, and it would be stupid to pollute the harbor after it cost us so much by way of water rates to get it clean. So I don't know if we have the answer to that offhand, but I would like that answer. And then the other issue is with regard to climate change and this 9 inches by 2030. Do we know what year that 9-inch estimate was made? And if so, what year was it? And have we done, or has anyone made any efforts to determine how much sea level change has occurred since that first projection was made, so that we can determine whether or not it's remotely accurate? And then I guess I would say third is that it seems to me that to restore it as an open public park would be a great expenditure of resource, not only for the community, but especially because it's a historic location. And if the community hasn't seen it, Pier 5 Association did a rendering, which is on its website, pier5.org, of what Pier 5 Association would like to see there, which is an open public park with pieces of the pier removed so that you could see down into the water, with educational components so that children could learn, with historic components, but also open access to the waterfront with fishing and boat dockage for the public, because as everybody has recognized, you can put a boat in at the Little Mystic and you can row it around the corner, but you can't tie it up anywhere because it's all private dockage. And frankly,
Why don't we,
I would like to see,
just,
I'm almost done. I would just
Okay,
like to see some kind of prevention of having one of those mega yachts tied up at the end of whatever we put there, because it totally defeats and I know the Legacy's have Pier 6 and they do a good job with it, but it totally defeats having it open public access to the harbor when you have some super yacht blocking the view. That's all I have to say. I would like answers to my questions.
yes, I think Paul, maybe just the demolition question and the environmental one, and then maybe Rebecca to follow.
Yeah, so as far as contaminated sediments, sediment removal or dredging is not considered as part of this cost estimate. None of the proposed alternatives would require that. As far as any other environmental concerns, as you get further into the permitting process, all of the regulatory agencies weigh in. Anything that needs to happen to preserve the environment, they will recommend and enforce. As of right now, though, there would be no need to remove any sediments, and that wasn't part of it.
Paul, just so I'm clear, so that means that if you do a demo, you're going to be cutting the pilings off at the muck line? Am I right?
So the details on exactly how they would be removed are to be determined. It may include cutting at muck line. It may include pulling them out completely. Whatever methods would be proposed much further down the line would be proposed in front of the regulatory agencies, and they would make the ultimate decision on what needed to be done to preserve the environment.
Okay, and I'd just like to add that if you do pull them, you're going to be removing sublateral support for all the shoreside structures in the near area. So frankly, being in Flagship Wharf, I would not be in favor of that. And I also think it creates a huge environmental hazard. Sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, let's go. We'll have Rebecca answer that last part, and then I just want to make sure we are attending all the other hands. So Rebecca.
Yeah, no, a lot of great points raised and certainly considerations. We are very much in the early stages, but all of these will inform future decisions, future work, future whatever the condition is that this pier is established to. So I really appreciate this perspective and feedback. To the point of the sea level rise and where we're at and where it was measured from. So Climate Ready Boston was effectuated in 2016. And so the levels and the sea level rise that we're talking about is from 2016 to 2030. So that's where the 9 inches of sea level rise are expected, with even more, into 2070 and beyond. And so we actually very opportune had this conversation today to really understand what the change has been from 2016 to now. So we're hoping to get some additional information as to that, but our best estimates is it's been a couple inches since that period of time, and it will hit the 9 inches of sea level rise by 2030. This is a little bit of a pitch for other work that the team is doing, is that we do intend later in this year to do engagement around climate resilience and coastal resilience around this entirety of the area. And so certainly more information will be shared at that point, but we want to make sure that anything and any solution and any future use of the site is very acknowledging of the climate resilience goals that the city and the BPDA have here. So we are taking all of that into consideration as we are moving forward with the site.
Thanks, Rebecca. So apologies, Dan, I'm going to go with Diane since you've already spoken, but Dan, I'll follow up with you after, I believe, Connie, who hasn't spoken yet. So stay tight, Dan. Diane?
I just wanted to add 2 points. I live in the Navy Yard, and having observed, especially over the last 3 years, some increasing consumer usage, not always approved at this point in time, that I'm wondering if we could fold in to promote more community engagement. One being, people are starting to now jump more into the inlet between Pier 4 and 5 to swim on the very hot days, as we've had some increasing warmth. And it seems that being on the waterfront, one of our problems is no direct access to swimming. And so one thing I've noticed that Europe is starting to use floating pools, and they're putting them in rocky areas on to increase access for their public to be able to use the waterfront area where it's pretty rocky and deep. They have these nettings underneath so you can't fall through, but again, it's a floating dock type square thing that it's again public access. And that way you can have the adults be able to use and swim there more safely, and children, it'd be an opportunity to give children swimming lessons in an ocean environment, rather than, as I said, I'm seeing an increasing sneaking into the inlet, which is clearly very dangerous. And that could be addressed by this proposal. And the other thing I noticed is, again, we're starting to see our Asian population fishing around on the different decks in that, and to give an actual spot that is, again, safe, rather than having people climbing over the walls and between the fencing to go fishing. If there was a park, or again, that elf float on the end, someplace where people could fish. So I think that would address 2 of the things and increase more, again, engagement for peoples that aren't getting ready access to the waterfront. So that's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. All is noted. Dave?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the presentation. It's very helpful. I just want to those who don't know me, I'm Dave DiLorento, the Director of Courageous Sailing at neighboring Pier 4. We're very interested in the project. It bears on our continued operations, as many of you know, need full access to the water sheet off of Pier 4 in order to, between Piers 4 and 5, in order to continue to operate. I appreciate so many of the comments so far, and I want to clarify that while sailing is our core activity, our mission is educational and social emotional, and we've been around for 36 years, and we exist to serve kids, particularly kids from low income and marginalized backgrounds, and their families and the community. So we would very much love to see a future development of Pier 5 that, yes, perhaps includes room for us to do a little bit more of what we do, but that would extend well beyond sailing, and we would envision the space as being there for the community, and anything that we would be interested in doing there would promote, would be in support of and be promoting community access well beyond sailing and boating. We love the idea of additional swimming and fishing and education and preservation of open space. We think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here, and we're looking forward to being involved.
Thank you, Dave. I right before I go to Kathleen, I just want to say that at around 7:25, I'm going to cover the disposition and next steps. So we'll try to wrap up as many comments between or many hands between now and then. If you don't, we'll have opportunities for other further comment, but I don't want that to surprise anyone. Kathleen? Kathleen, you're still muted. Kathleen Kolar.
Kathleen put some comments in the chat. Just acknowledging that in case she's having difficulties.
Okay. And if you are Kathleen, we can connect after this as well, if that's easier. So with that, why don't we move it over to James?
Thanks, Natalie. Thank you, BPDA, for hosting this. It's been very informative. And all the comments have really triggered a lot of thoughts on my end. What I'd like to start with is a larger concept for this space, in line with what have already been mentioned, that this is a unique site, head of the harbor, and unique also in the sense that it's part of the Navy Yard Historical Park, the USS Constitution. All these landmarks make this entire part of the city unique. And I think we can do something that makes this development opportunity a unique event as well, one that brings the city together. What I'm thinking is that, is it possible to think along the lines of what makes this unique and brings the parties together to create something along the lines of a public-private partnership? Dave DiLorenzo of Courageous Sailing mentioned that they would very much like to be part of this new development. And I think they will be great. They are a long-term stakeholder. Their quality of management is exemplary. I think we all recognize that. What they do to the city, what they do to the inner city and the inner city children is especially important part of their mission. So it would be nice to see them expand or at least be part of this project so that they can lend their management team to be part of the management solution. Anything we do here would have a long-term management component to it. So in terms of that, they can bring that piece to the table. The USS Constitution, the historic park, is also undergoing a major replanning project. We've seen their presentation, a very early one last time. And I think it's also an opportunity to bring them into the picture. They have the, a lot of artifacts along the way, including, this pump house, which is nearby. I'm thinking that the ferry, the pump house, and the Navy Yard Constitution reactivation can make this part of the, the whole Navy Yard area much more accessible and much more city-oriented in the larger sense of Boston City. I like the idea of floating park. I think something like that would make this unique and would make it compatible to a expansion of the Courageous Sailing. A floating park you don't see anywhere throughout the city. The marinas are closed, as have been mentioned. So something along the lines of a real imaginative reuse of this, which incorporates education, incorporates sailing, incorporates recreation, would make this quite a unique space, not just for Charlestown, but for the entire Boston. And those are my points.
Thank you, James. They are all noted. I appreciate it. Connie?
Yes, hello. I was wanting to ask about something you said earlier about envisioning a public and private partnership. And I was wondering if you could give me some examples of such a partnership that resulted in a private agency paying for a public park.
So I can jump in on that. So I would say that the Pier 5 is one of the most unique assets we have. So I wouldn't say from a BPDA perspective, we have a lot of examples of public-private partnership, but what we have seen and encountered in various other parts of the city, and I think this has been done very well in other places, is the ability for, private partners to be able to take, whatever resources they have and reinvest in the future and activate the space. The BPDA is a property owner, but we are not an activator. We are not a, steward of parks. We are not able to, I think, envision in a way that a private partner would be able to do. And that's why we would be looking for someone to help work with us to re-envision and really bring to life a lot of the community activation that's here. Again, this is not a Boston example, caveating that, but an example that we have seen that has worked really successfully is in Bryant Park. They were able to, there was a private entity that worked with the city of New York to be able to bring that and bring the activation that exists in that area in particular. So models like that are ones that we have observed and we've researched, and we're trying to understand a better way to be able to bring that open space and activity to things like Pier 5. So again, in the city of Boston, there's a little bit less examples that we have, but we are very much interested in looking with a partner that can help think creatively about it.
Okay, so I guess what I'm struggling with is something that Paul DiGiamarino said earlier. It just doesn't seem realistic that we're going to be able to find a partner willing to spend millions of dollars to create a park for public access. And I just feel like we're getting our hopes up for something that isn't very realistic. The other thing that I wanted to ask, I think Mr. Marsala from FOTH mentioned that the inspection was limited just to the outside piles and not below the water line. And also they didn't do any diving. So I kind of am questioning the numbers that are being given in terms of demolition and reconstruction, because it sounds like there's an awful lot of unknowns still as part of the engineering that was done. Maybe he can talk about that a little bit.
Paul?
Yeah. So for our cost estimates, any aspects that would require a structural rehabilitation of each individual pile, we assumed that the worst condition, basically, so that a full encasement in the new in this the wrap filled with concrete would take place. So that would have been a kind of a what is very likely to need to happen. So that's sort of the way we handled that. And then I guess what was your other question? I'm sorry.
I asked about the inspection being only limited to the outside piles, and I also asked if you were going to have to be doing any diving since you didn't do any during this particular.
Yeah, so if a repair option were considered, more diving would need to take place. From the inspections that were conducted, enough information was gathered to basically understand that any reuse of the existing pier without demolition would require substantial repair. So you would need to inspect each element underwater that was getting the repair prior to it. But more than enough information was gathered to understand that full jacketing from the all the way above water down to the mud line would need to take place. So as far as a rough cost estimate perspective, it's plenty of information to get an order of magnitude, and understanding that a full pile repair would be necessary for the piles that were deemed necessary to get the proper loading, which we assumed, I believe it was half of the piles.
Okay, I guess I just wanted some assurance that these 18 to 32 million for a full repair isn't going to double once you do further observations. And you're saying, no, you've seen enough so that you know that these numbers are.
I suppose the short answer to that is, there is no assurance in any type of construction. Once construction actually takes place, things may occur, and that's true for home building all the way up to whatever type of construction. That said, this was a full investigation, and it informed our cost estimates appropriately, we feel, based on other repairs that happened in the area with structures built during similar time periods, and this was our best cost estimate for order of magnitude, for sure.
Thank you. Just in the interest of time, I'd like to move on to Dan and Stephen, and hopefully if we can keep it under a few minutes, then I'll wrap up with the last couple slides.
Yeah, Paul, question is, if we remove these piles and replace them with new piles, would that be a cheaper solution than trying to rehabilitate these piles?
So I don't want to misspeak. I would have to go back to my different options that we considered.
Ripping out what we have and putting new.
So new, we did not, I did not do a cost estimate on a full demolition with a full new construction. We did estimate.
Would you guess that it would be cheaper to replace than to rehab?
Potentially.
Okay. Could we get something pulled together on that point, just so we have a better clue? I think that would be beneficial.
Maybe Dan, okay, yeah, we can talk after, but continue your point.
Yeah, I think a lot of what people are asking for can be all done within this space. We can have spaces that are a floating dock. We can have a water space. We can have some significant structure at the end of the pier so that people have a better view of things, especially when the USS Constitution goes in and out, as well as the harbor itself. I think there's too much to lose here if we just get rid of it. And I think the park, the greening of the area is important. So I just like to see more data on how we can make this workable. And there's too many choices here that we can't really get into right now. But let's get better data on how to completely dismantle it, and then maybe later on rebuild it, or rebuild it now. I'd like to see it rebuilt now, but it's up to them. And I do want to see Courageous get a little more space out of it, so we can move the pier over a few feet if need be. It doesn't have to be locked in the same space. That's it.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Stephen, for the last question.
Yeah, thank you. And we've done this in the last part of the call. I really think what we should be focusing in on first is what kind of programs we want there. That's probably going to drive what the structure should look like. But I think we should really come to some consent in the programs. And hopefully we should put some emphasis on the programs being financially sustainable. In other words, we're not going to build something for a program that can't sustain itself. So, again, Courageous, I think, fits into that category.
Thank you, Stephen. And you provided me with quite a nice segue. So I'm going to go to the next slide, which is the next steps, and go over what the next set of steps is for the timeline. So tonight, obviously, we have now held a community meeting, which is about to conclude. This engineering report that Paul has presented is posted on the Pier5 website. If one of our staff people could drop the link in the chat, that would be great. So you can download it from there. Also being launched on that same site is a public comment period. So if you have any questions from this, if you have any other ideas, anything you want to make sure is prioritized, that's the place to do it. And we will be collecting responses from there too. This was incredibly informative, and it will help shape what are the beginnings of the disposition RFP. And the way we do that is that the next step is next time you I hold the community meeting, it will be to show you what we have interpreted as the development guidelines. Again, which is really informed by the conversation we all had here today and the findings from both. So we will gather sometime in spring to discuss that development guidelines, which will be foundational to the disposition RFP, which we're hoping to release in early summer 2024. We usually put out a disposition RFP for about 2 to 3 months. Following that, we will, if there are proposals, we will review them both internally and with the community to hopefully present those to you all by fall. So that is a high level timeline. Again, I just want to say thank you. We made it to 7:30 on the dot. This is the beginning of a conversation. I hope that's been said multiple times by me, but if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at natalie.dduck@boston.gov. You can also, again, use any of, if you want your comments for public record as well, please use the public comment function within the Pier5 website too. On that page also, this Zoom recording, as well as the chat and all the slides will be there too for public download, in case you'd like to review that as well. So with that, thank you again. I will conclude this meeting and hopefully we'll see you for the next community one. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.